Maribel had a gun in her hand and no strength left in her body. By the time she saw the man step down from the wagon, her vision had already begun to swim. She kept the revolver raised because lowering it felt too much like surrender. The stranger did not rush her. He only stood in the road and looked at her as if he could see past the dirt on her face and the shaking in her wrist. When her knees gave way, she hated that he caught her before the ground could. When she woke beside a fire with a coat around her shoulders, shame hit harder than hunger. She had tried to rob a man and failed, and then he had answered her crime with mercy. Mara sat up too fast and saw him crouched by the flames with a tin pot in his hands. He glanced over once, calm as before. Not angry, not smug, just steady. He handed her water. She stared at it, then at him. His wagon stood a short way off. "Drink," he said. Mara wanted to throw the water in his face. Instead, she took it with both hands and drank until it hurt. "That bad?" he asked. She wiped her mouth. "I said I was not begging." "You did." He stirred the pot once. "You also near fell dead in the road." There was no insult in his voice. That made it worse. Mara looked away. "Why did you not take me to the sheriff?" "Because I have eyes." She frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means you look starving, not vicious." He let the spoon rest. "It means your boots are worn through and your hands are not a thief's hands. They are a mother's hands." Her grip tightened. "You do not know anything about me." "Then tell me where I am wrong." The fire cracked between them. A horse snorted beyond the wagon. Mara stared into the flames. "I have 2 children," she said at last, "a girl and a boy." He waited. "I left them with a woman in Dry Hollow while I went looking for work. I came back with nothing. She was gone." Mara swallowed. "So were they." His jaw hardened. "Did she take them?" "She sold them." Her voice broke anyway. "Told a neighbor she needed the money." He was silent a moment. "What are their names?" "Lucy and Sam." "How old?" 7 and 5. He nodded once. Then he filled a plate with beans, bacon, and bread and held it out. Mara stared at the food. "I cannot pay you." "I did not ask you to." "I pointed a gun at you." "And now you are eating breakfast." He raised the plate a little. "One thing at a time." She took it and ate with shaking hands. He gave her the dignity not to watch. After a while she said, "What is your name?" "Caleb Mercer." "Maribel." He nodded as if that mattered. When she finished, he set coffee beside her. "I can point you toward Dry Hollow after sunrise, or I can do better than that." Mara looked up. "How?" "I haul goods from one desert town to the next. I know trading posts, ranch hands, stable boys, widows, and liars from Red Wash to Copper Creek." He rested his forearms on his knees. "2 children that age do not vanish clean in this territory. Somebody saw something." "And you would help me." She heard the disbelief in her own voice. "Why?" "Because a woman who still has the nerve to pull a revolver when she is too hungry to stand is not done fighting." His eyes held hers. "And because I do not like people who sell children." It had been years since any kindness had come to Mara without a price tied to it. "What would you want from me?" she asked. "Honesty, help on the road, and no more pistols pointed at my head." Despite herself, she glanced toward the revolver resting near one wagon wheel. He had put it where she could see it but not reach it. "You are either foolish," she said, "or the best man I ever met." His mouth moved, almost a smile. "Those are not always different things." By full morning, they were back on the road. Mara sat on the wagon bench with a blanket across her lap and a scrap of paper in her hands. It was not a real map, only towns and trails marked in neat pencil lines. Dry Hollow, Red Wash Mesquite Crossing, Copper Creek. "You know all this by heart?" she asked. "Most of it." He climbed up beside her and the wagon rolled forward. Dust rose behind them. Morning light spread across the desert. "If we find them," Mara said carefully, "I take my children and I go. You understand that?" Caleb kept his eyes on the trail. "If that is what you want." She studied his face, looking for disappointment. There was none. You really would help me just like that? No, he said. Mara stiffened. He glanced at her then. Not just like that, you forgot one thing. Her breath caught. The same words from the road. What thing? My last name. She frowned. What does that mean? It means if I give my word, I give all of it. He flicked the reins lightly. Mercers do not do halfway. Near noon they stopped at a trading post made of warped boards and stubbornness. Caleb went inside while Mara stayed by the wagon, not ready to be looked at too closely by strangers. Two men argued by the trough. Caleb came back too fast. Mara stood at once. What is it? Boy inside remembers a pair of children taken through 3 weeks ago. One girl with dark braids. One little boy who would not speak. Hope hurt worse than fear. Mara gripped the wagon rail. Where? Sold to a ranch hand south of Mesquite Crossing. He stepped closer when she swayed. It is not proof yet. It is enough. Her voice came sharp. It is enough for me. They rode hard through the afternoon. Heat shimmered above the earth. The cliffs burned red by evening. Every mile felt like promise and punishment both. At last Caleb slowed the team near a dry wash. We camp here. Myra turned on him at once. No. Your children need you alive when we reach them. I have already lost enough time. And if the horses fail in the dark, you lose more. His voice stayed level. Eat, rest, we ride at first light. She hated that he was right, hated even more that she trusted him to be. That night she sat across the fire from him, arms around her knees, listening to the horses shift and the mesquite pop. Caleb mended a trace strap near the wagon, hands skilled and patient. You ever have children? She asked. His hands paused. No. The firelight moved across his face. There was something old there. You wanted them, Mara said. It was not a question. He looked up at her. Once. She nodded, and that was all. The silence between them changed after that. It no longer felt empty. It felt shared. Much later, when the fire had burned low and the stars stretched cold over the desert, Mara lay awake in his blanket listening to his breathing on the far side of camp. She should have taken her revolver and slipped away before dawn. She should have trusted no one but herself. Instead, she closed her eyes and held on to one impossible thought. Tomorrow, for the first time in weeks, she would not be searching alone. The next morning began before sunrise. Mara was already awake when Caleb stirred the coals. She had not slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lucy's face and Sam's little hand reaching for hers. The coffee Caleb poured tasted bitter, but it steadied her. They packed camp without wasted motion. The wagon wheels rolled before the sky had fully turned blue. By mid-morning, they reached Mesquite Crossing. It was less a town than a hard patch of earth with a feed store, a blacksmith shed, and a saloon that looked tired even in daylight. Caleb reined in near the smithy. Mara climbed down beside him, her pulse beating high in her throat. You stay close, Caleb said. I am not made of glass. I know that. He looked at her once. That is why I said close, not back. She did not answer, but she stayed beside him. Inside the blacksmith shed, a thick-armed man with a gray beard looked up from a horseshoe. His eyes moved from Caleb to Mara and back again. Caleb greeted him like an old acquaintance. There was history in the ease of it. Men like Caleb seemed to leave a trail of earned respect wherever they went. Mara was still getting used to that. You hear anything about a ranch hand buying 2 children lately? Caleb asked. The blacksmith's face changed. Depends who is asking. A man who means to bring them home. The blacksmith set the iron down. Name S. Warren Pike. Works out on a spread near Coyote Bend. Not the owner, just a buyer and bully. He glanced at Mara then and his voice softened. Little girl kept asking for her mama. Boy stayed behind her like a shadow. Mara had to grip the edge of a work table to keep herself upright. Caleb stepped a little closer without touching her. How far? Half day south if your team holds. That is enough. The blacksmith lowered his voice. Pike drinks, gets mean when cornered. If you go in ready. Caleb nodded. I will. Mara turned toward the door. Then we stopped standing here. They rode hard again. The land opened wide and dry around them. Low brush clung to the ground. Heat rose in waves. The wagon rattled over stone and sand, and the horses worked with their heads down. Mara tried to stay still, but every few minutes her hands twisted together in her lap. Caleb said little. He only drove and watched the trail ahead. At one point he passed her the canteen. She drank, then handed it back. You keep doing that. Doing what? Acting like this can be done. He flicked the reins lightly. It can. You do not know that. I know despair is useless on the road. She let out a dry breath that almost sounded like a laugh. You always talk like that. Only when someone needs it. She looked at him. Dust clung to his collar and jaw. Sunlight caught in the rough brown of his hair. He was not polished or grand. He was simply solid. He said things as if they could bear weight. By late afternoon, Coyote Bend came into view. The ranch sat in a shallow valley behind a long fence line. A barn leaned in the distance. A shed stood off to one side. Mara's breathing turned shallow. That shed, she whispered. I do not know why, but I feel it. Caleb drew the wagon to a stop. Stay behind me until we know. No. He looked at her. If my children are here, I am not hiding behind anyone. For a second she thought he might argue. Instead he nodded. Then stay beside me. A man came out of the main house as they approached. He was tall, narrow-eyed, and already annoyed before either of them spoke. One hand rested near his belt. What do you want? Mara stepped forward first. 2 children were brought here, a girl named Lucy, a boy named Sam. The man's eyes shifted just for a moment. That was enough. Bought a pair, he said. Did not come with names. Caleb moved one step ahead, calm but dangerous in a way Mara had not yet seen. They are not stock, they are hers. The man spat in the dirt. Then she should have kept hold of them. Mara felt the world narrow. She would have rushed him then and there if Caleb had not put one arm out across her path. We will take them now, Caleb said, and if I say no. Caleb's hand rested near his holster. Then you make a foolish choice. The ranch hand looked from Caleb to Mara. Maybe he saw the fury in her face. Maybe he saw something colder in Caleb's. Whatever it was, it worked on him. His mouth tightened. Shed, he muttered. They've been in the shed. Mara did not wait. She ran. The door stuck for half a second, then gave way under her shoulder. The inside smelled of dust, hay, and fear. Light fell through the slats in thin gold lines. In the far corner, 2 small figures huddled close together. Lucy looked up first. For one terrible breath, Mara feared her daughter would not know her. Then Lucy's whole face broke open. Mama. The word tore through her. Mara fell to her knees and gathered both children against her so fast they nearly toppled with her. Lucy clung to her neck. Sam buried his face against her chest and made a sound Mara had never heard from him before, a broken little cry that seemed pulled from the bottom of him. I am here, she whispered. I am here now. I have got you. I have got you. She kissed their hair, their cheeks, their dusty foreheads. Lucy's braid had come half loose. Sam felt too light in her arms. Behind her, Boots stopped at the doorway. Caleb did not come in. He gave her the room. A few minutes later, when Mara could finally stand again, she turned with one child on each side of her. Caleb was waiting by the door, hat in hand. His eyes went soft when he saw them. Lucy pressed closer to Mara. Sam peeked out from behind her skirt. This is Caleb, Mara said, her voice still shaking. He helped me find you. Caleb bent a little so he would not seem so tall. You 2 ready to leave this place? Lucy nodded first. Sam nodded after her. On the way back to the wagon, the ranch hand stood near the porch, sour and silent. Mara stopped in front of him. She wanted to strike him. She wanted to put every hour of fear into one hard blow. Instead she said, You looked at children and saw money. That is all you are. Then she turned her back on him, and that felt better. The wagon ride away from Coyote Bend was quiet at first. Lucy sat pressed to Mara's side beneath the canvas shade. Sam leaned against Mara's lap and would not let go of her skirt. Caleb drove without speaking, giving them the silence they needed. After some miles, Lucy looked up at him. "Are you a sheriff?" Caleb smiled faintly. "No." "Then why did you help us?" He kept his eyes on the road. "Because your mother is hard to refuse." Lucy considered that seriously. "She is." Mara let out a soft sound that was half laugh, half sob. That evening they camped by a stand of cottonwoods. Caleb made the fire while Mara washed her children's faces and hands. Sam would not stray more than an arm's length from her. Lucy kept glancing at Caleb when she thought he would not notice. Over supper she finally asked, "Are you the man Mama robbed?" Mara closed her eyes for 1 second. "Lucy." But Caleb just tore off a piece of bread and nodded. "She tried." Lucy blinked. "And you still helped her." He chewed, swallowed, then said, "Seemed like the right thing." Lucy looked at him for a long moment. "Mama says right things are usually the hard ones." Caleb glanced at Mara across the fire. "Your mother says smart things." Night settled slowly. One by one the children grew drowsy. Mara tucked them into blankets in the wagon bed. When she stepped back to the fire, Caleb handed her a cup of coffee. "You did it," she said quietly. "No, we did it." She looked toward the wagon where Lucy and Sam slept at last, safe and close. Then she looked back at him. "I do not know how to thank you." Caleb held her gaze. "You already did." "How?" "You trusted me." The fire popped between them. Mara felt the weight of the day, the terror, the relief, and something else she was not ready to name. For the first time in a long while, tomorrow did not look like an open wound. It looked like a road. The next morning came soft and pale through the cottonwoods. Mara woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Lucy whispering to Sam in the wagon bed. For one startled second, she thought she had dreamed them back. Then Lucy pushed aside the blanket, her dark hair wild from sleep, and Sam sat up rubbing his eyes. The sight of them hit Mara so hard she had to look away and breathe. Caleb stood by the fire, pouring coffee into a tin cup as if this were any other morning on the trail. That steadiness helped more than he knew. She climbed down from the wagon and went straight to her children, touching Lucy's cheek, then Sam's shoulder, just to feel that they were still there. Lucy leaned into her hand. "Are we really staying with you now?" "Yes," Mara said, though the word came out rough. "You are staying with me." Sam looked past her toward Caleb, and him. Mara followed his gaze. Caleb was crouched by the skillet, turning bacon with easy movements. He looked up only when he felt them watching. "For now," Mara said. Sam thought about that and nodded as if he had accepted a fair bargain. Lucy was not as easy. She studied adults the way children do when life has taught them too much. Mara saw the question in her daughter's face and knew she had no clean answer yet. She had her children back, but she had no home, no savings, and no road that looked safe. That truth sat heavy in her chest while Caleb passed around breakfast. They ate in the cool of morning before the heat could rise. Sam finished first and asked if he could feed the horses. Caleb took him by the hand and showed him how to do it without getting stepped on. Lucy stayed close to Mara and picked at the edge of her biscuit. There were dark hollows under the girl's eyes that made Mara ache inside. When the children moved off toward the wagon, Caleb settled across from Mara near the fire. He did not ease into the subject. He never seemed to waste words that way. "What are you going to do now?" Mara stared into her empty plate. "I have been asking myself that since last night." "You can go back north." "No," the answer came fast and hard. "I will not take them back anywhere near Dry Hollow, not after what happened." He nodded once, then farther west. "To what?" She looked up at him. "A room I cannot pay for, work nobody gives a woman with 2 children hanging on her skirts, another stranger who says she can be trusted." Mara shook her head. "I am done handing my children to the mercy of other people." Caleb sat quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I have a place." She frowned. "A place?" "South of Red Mesa, old homestead land. House needs work, But the well is sound, and the barn still stands if you do not lean on the west side too hard. Mara watched him, waiting for the catch. You and the children can stay there, he said, long as you need. She let out a low breath. You make foolish offers mighty easy. No, his voice stayed calm. I make careful ones, I know what I am saying. And why would you do that? Because children need walls more than wagon canvas. His eyes held hers. And because you need one place in this territory where you do not have to fight every hour. Mara looked away first. It had been easier facing a gun than this kind of kindness. Kindness asked things of a person. It asked trust. It asked hope. Both had cost her dearly before. Lucy ran back then with Sam behind her. Mama, can I ride up front today? Mara looked at Caleb. He smiled faintly. There is room. By midday, Lucy sat between them on the wagon bench, asking more questions than either adult could answer in one breath. Sam stayed in the wagon bed with a strip of leather Caleb had given him to braid and unbraid. The land rolled wide around them, all dry grass, red dirt and low brush bending under the wind. Mara had forgotten how children could change the feel of a day. Even the silence was different with them there. It breathed easier. Lucy pointed toward a line of cliffs in the distance. Do you live near those? Near enough to see them when the light is right, Caleb said. Do you live all alone? I do. Why? Mara almost told her not to pry, but Caleb answered without offense. Life turned that way. Lucy took that in with the grave seriousness children sometimes wear. Mama says life turns bad when people stop being decent. At that, Caleb glanced toward Mara. Your mother has a way with words. Mara folded her arms. Do not encourage her, she already talks plenty. Lucy grinned for the first time since Mara had found her. The sight struck Caleb too. Mara saw it in the way his face softened. He noticed the children carefully, never with pity, always with respect. Sam said little, but when the wagon lurched over a rut and nearly tipped him sideways, Caleb was back there in a moment, steadying him with one sure hand. He did not fuss. He simply made himself dependable. They camped that evening beside a narrow creek hidden under cottonwoods. Sam fell asleep before supper was even finished. Lucy made it through half a story Caleb told about a mule that once kicked open a hotel room door in Tucson before her eyes drifted shut. Mara tucked both children into blankets and sat by the fire afterward with her hands around a cooling cup of coffee. Caleb was cleaning a pan with sand and a rag. You are good with them, she said. He shrugged lightly. They are easy to like. That is not what I meant. He set the pan aside. Firelight moved over his face. I had brothers younger than me, helped raise some of them after my father died. There were always children underfoot when I was a boy. Mara watched him. You never married. His expression changed, not shutting down but turning inward. I was close once. She waited. She died of fever before we could build the life we planned. The creek moved softly in the dark beyond them. Mara looked into the fire and felt ashamed of every hard guess she had made about him. I am sorry. He nodded. It was years ago. But it still sits with you. Yes, he did not try to deny it. Some losses never leave. You just learn where to carry them. That stayed with Mara. She had known men who turned grief into bitterness, anger, or drink. Caleb had turned his into gentleness, and she did not know which hurt more to witness. A little later, he stood and threw another branch on the fire. You should sleep. We have miles tomorrow. Mara looked toward the wagon where Lucy and Sam were tucked beneath his spare blanket. If I take your offer, she said slowly, I do not want charity. It is not charity. What is it then? Caleb met her eyes across the flames, a chance to start over. She almost looked away but did not. And what do you get? He was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then he said, maybe a reason to stop riding alone. The honesty of it unsettled her more than any bold speech could have. There was no pressure in his voice, no demand. He had laid the truth down between them and left her free to step around it. That night, Mara lay awake beside her children in the wagon bed and listened to the fire settle. Caleb's words would not leave her alone. A chance to start over. She had lived so long in survival that the idea itself felt dangerous. Yet when Lucy turned in sleep and put one small hand against Mara's side, the answer became clearer. Her children needed more than rescue. They needed steadiness, a roof, a latch on a door, a life not built mile by mile in fear. At dawn she climbed down from the wagon and found Caleb at the creek splashing water on his face. He straightened when he saw her. "I will come," she said. He did not grin or celebrate. He only nodded like a man accepting something important with the care it deserved. "All right. But hear me plain." She stepped closer. "I'm coming for the children, that is first. I know. And if at any point I think they are not safe, I leave." "You should." She searched his face for mockery and found none. The morning light caught the rough line of his jaw and the water still on his hands. "You really mean what you say," she murmured. He gave the smallest lift of one shoulder. "You forgot one thing." Her breath caught. "What?" "My last name." His eyes held hers. Mercers keep their word. For the first time, Mara smiled before she could stop herself. Then Lucy called from the wagon. Sam started crying for breakfast, and the moment broke like dawn over the desert. Still, it stayed with her. By late afternoon on the second day, Caleb's homestead came into view beyond a stretch of dry grass and scattered mesquite. It sat low against the land, weathered and plain, with a slanted roof and a porch that looked one hard storm away from giving up. The barn leaned a little to the west just as he had warned. A windmill stood off near the well, still but upright. Nothing about the place was grand. Still, Mara felt her chest tighten when she saw it. It was the first piece of land in a long time that did not belong to danger. Lucy stood on the wagon seat to get a better look. "That is it." "That is it," Caleb said. Sam peeked over the wagon edge. "It looks tired." Caleb smiled. "It is, but tired things can be fixed." Mara said nothing. She kept looking at the house as if it might vanish if she blinked. She had imagined many endings while searching for her children. Most of them were bad. None had looked like this. A worn house, a clean well, a man who did not talk big and still somehow made space feel safe. When the wagon stopped, Caleb climbed down first and reached up for Sam. Then Lucy. Mara came down last on her own. The porch boards groaned under Caleb's boots when he crossed to the door. He pushed it open and the smell of old wood and dust drifted out. Sunlight fell across a single main room, a rusty stove, a rough table, and one narrow cot against the far wall. Lucy stepped in first, turning slowly. "It is small." "It is dry," Caleb said. "That counts." Sam pointed to the cot. "Who sleeps there?" "You two can, until I build another." Mara set a hand on his shoulder. "We will see." Caleb glanced at her. "We will." That was one thing Mara had learned about him. He did not push when a softer step would do. He carried his strength quietly. For a man alone on the frontier, that was a rare kind of discipline. The children wandered the room while Caleb opened shutters and let in air. Mara stepped back outside and looked over the land. To the east, low hills sat under a hazy blue line of sky. To the south, the ground fell away into a wash with scrub growing along the banks. A few cottonwoods stood farther off, their leaves whispering in the wind. It was still Arizona, still dry, still hard. But it felt like the sort of place where a life might hold. "How deep is the well?" she asked when Caleb came out. 50 feet or so. Water stays decent through summer if you do not waste it." "And the barn?" "Needs bracing. One wall is weak." He looked toward the house. "Roof above the back room leaks in a heavy rain, but not much." Myra folded her arms. "You really meant to live like this alone?" "I did live like this alone." The words landed heavier than she expected. She looked at him then, really looked, at the work in his hands, the tiredness hidden behind his calm, the long habit of doing everything himself because there had been no one else to share it with. Lucy ran out onto the porch. "Mama, there is a shelf by the window. Can I put things there?" Mara blinked. "What things?" My things. She almost said you do not have any things, then she stopped herself. Lucy had a ribbon, a wooden button, and a little scrap doll made from cloth and twine. That was enough to count. Yes, Mara said, you can. Lucy grinned and darted back inside. Caleb watched her go with a look Mara could not quite name. It was not pity. It was something gentler, something like quiet care. They spent the rest of the evening making the place fit for children. Caleb dragged in a trunk from the barn for Lucy and Sam to use as a bench. Mara beat dust from blankets and swept the floor with a worn broom until the air turned gray with it. Sam carried kindling one piece at a time like it was serious work. Lucy wiped the table with a rag and frowned at every streak she missed. Little by little, the cabin stopped feeling abandoned. At supper, they ate beans and biscuits at the rough table. Sam nearly fell asleep with food still in his hand. Lucy kept looking around the room, making sure it stayed real. "Mama," she asked at last, "are we staying here now?" Mara looked across the table at Caleb. His face gave nothing away. He would not answer for her. He would not trap her by saying the words first. "For now," Mara said. Lucy nodded, satisfied enough. Sam was already too tired to care. Caleb stood after supper and lifted the boy with easy care, carrying him to the cot. Mara tucked Lucy in beside him. When she turned around, Caleb was hanging a blanket across one corner of the room. "What is that for?" "So you and the children can change in private." Mara stared at the blanket, then at him. "And you?" "I have slept in the barn before." "You are not sleeping in the barn." "It is fine." "No," the word came sharper than she meant it to. "This is your house." He leaned one shoulder against the wall. "Then I will sleep on the porch." Mara let out a breath. "You always do this." "Do what?" "Act like your comfort matters least." His mouth shifted faintly. "Somebody has to think practical." She wanted to argue more, but there was a softness under her irritation that unsettled her. In the end, he spread his bedroll just outside the door where he could hear the children if they stirred. That felt like the sort of compromise only Caleb Mercer could make seem natural. Night settled hard and quiet around the house. Mara lay awake longer than she meant to, listening to Lucy and Sam breathe beside her. The room smelled of dust, coffee grounds, and old pine boards warmed through the day. Beyond the blanket, she could hear the porch creak once when Caleb shifted in his sleep. It should have felt strange, this house, this man, this sudden turn her life had taken. Instead, the strangeness came from the peace. Before dawn, she got up and stepped outside. The sky was just beginning to pale. Caleb was already awake, kneeling by the porch post with tools spread beside him. "You ever sleep late?" she asked softly. "Not often." "What are you doing?" "Fixing what shakes before the children wake and test it harder." That pulled a tired smile from her. She wrapped her shawl tighter and stood watching him work. There was comfort in the sound of the hammer, comfort in the sight of a man repairing something because it needed doing, not because he wanted praise. After a while, he looked up. "Coffee will be on in a minute." Mara nodded, then said, "Caleb." He waited. "I do not know what this becomes." She glanced back toward the cabin. "But I know what you did for us. I will not forget it." His eyes held hers in the first gray light of morning. "Good." He set the hammer down. "Because I am hoping you stay long enough to remember more." Her breath caught a little. Neither of them moved. Then Sam called out from inside the house. Lucy answered him, and the day began before she could think of any safe reply. Still, when Mara turned back toward the cabin, she was smiling. The days that followed settled into a rhythm so simple it almost frightened Mara. Hard work in the morning, small repairs through the afternoon, supper near sunset, the children asleep soon after dark, then the quiet, always the quiet. It was not the empty kind she had known before. This one felt earned. It wrapped around the cabin and the porch and the little patch of ground outside like something trying to protect them. Caleb kept his word about the house. He fixed the porch posts first, then the leak above the back room, then the crooked latch on the front door. Lucy stood beside him during most of it, handing him nails from a tin cup and asking questions he answered like each one mattered. Sam preferred the barn. He followed Caleb there every afternoon and watched him brace the weak wall with grave attention, as if he were studying a sacred craft. Mara saw the way Caleb slowed his work for the boy, showing him how to hold a hammer, how to keep clear of a horse's heels, how to listen for a hollow sound in bad wood. One evening Sam came running in, face flushed from pride. He said, "I have a good eye." Mara looked up from peeling potatoes. "Did he?" Sam nodded hard. "For bad boards." From the doorway Caleb said, "That can save a man trouble." Sam stood taller at once. Mara had to turn away so they would not see the sudden sting in her eyes. Lucy changed in quieter ways. The shadow that had clung to her since Mara found her in the shed began to lift. She still woke from bad dreams some nights, but now there was a house around her when she did. There was a lamp on the table, a warm stove, and a man on the porch who rose at the first sound and checked the door without making a fuss. Mara noticed it every time. Caleb never came inside unless she called him. He simply made sure the dark stayed outside where it belonged. 3 weeks after they arrived, the first rain came. It was not much, just a steady evening shower moving across the desert with a smell of wet dust and sage. Mara stood in the doorway and watched it strike the porch boards. Lucy and Sam pressed close to the window, laughing every time the drops hit hard. Caleb was in the barn when it started. Mara saw him jogging back through the rain, hat pulled low, shirt dark at the shoulders. When he stepped onto the porch, water dripping from his sleeves, she laughed before she meant to. He stopped short. "What? You look surprised." "I am." He wiped rain from his brow. "I had not heard you laugh like that yet." The words settled between them, with the rain tapping all around. Mara's smile faded into something softer. "Maybe I had not either." Lucy called from inside, "Mama, the roof is not leaking." Caleb looked up toward the ceiling and let out a breath. "Good." Mara glanced at him. "You doubted yourself." "I doubt anything I build until a storm says otherwise." She stepped aside so he could enter. Then I suppose the storm just gave its answer. Later that night, after the children had fallen asleep and the rain had thinned to a whisper, Mara sat at the table darning one of Sam's socks. Caleb was near the stove, rubbing oil into a leather strap. The cabin glowed warm around them. Outside, the land was black and washed clean. "You ever think this is all too easy?" Mara asked without looking up. Caleb studied the strap in his hands. "No." She lifted her eyes then, just like that. Just like that. He set the leather aside. "Easy would have been you riding past my wagon and me letting you." Mara held his gaze. "Easy would have been me taking you to the sheriff and never learning your children's names." His voice stayed even. "Easy would have been keeping to myself." The sock slipped forgotten into her lap. "This," he said, looking around the cabin, "is not easy. It is work, but work and peace are not the same thing." Mara swallowed. She had spent so long thinking hardship was the price of being alive that peace still felt like a trick. "You make it sound simple." "I make it sound true." A silence stretched, warm and close, the kind that changed shape without warning. Mara said softly, "I do not know what you see when you look at me." Caleb did not answer right away. When he did, there was no hesitation in him. "I see a woman who was starved, frightened, and alone, and still walked into the road with a revolver because giving up would have meant losing her children forever." He leaned back in the chair, eyes steady on hers. "I see a mother who came back from something cruel without letting it make her cruel too." Mara could not speak. He went on, quieter now. "And I see someone I look for in every room, even when I know she is already there." The air in the cabin seemed to shift. Mara had been desired before. She had been looked at, judged, handled, and cornered. This was nothing like that. There was no taking in it, only truth. That frightened her more. She stood too fast, the chair scraping behind her. "I should check the children." He rose too, but he did not come closer. "Mara." She stopped. "You do not owe me an answer to anything tonight." Her back was still to him. She stared toward the blanket in the corner where Lucy and Sam slept. That makes it harder. Why? Because I do not know what to do with a man who leaves me free. When she finally turned, Caleb's expression had gone soft in a way that nearly undid her. I am not asking you for anything you cannot give, he said. That is the problem. Her voice shook now. You already gave more than anyone ever has. He took one slow step forward. No more, Myra. She lifted her chin. What? You forgot one thing. Her heart thudded. What thing now? My last name. The faintest smile touched his mouth, but his eyes stayed serious. I meant it from the first day, not as a joke, not as some line to win you over. I was telling you I do not offer half measures. The room went still around them. When I help someone, he said, I help all the way. When I stay, I stay. And if I ever ask a woman for her trust, I mean to spend the rest of my life earning it. Mara felt tears push hot against her eyes. She hated tears, hated how often life had dragged them out of her. But these were different. These came from standing too close to the thing she had stopped believing in. She crossed the space between them before fear could stop her. Not much. Just enough to reach for the front of his shirt with one hand. You should not say things like that to a woman who is already halfway lost, she whispered. Caleb's breath caught. Are you? She looked up at him. I think I have been for a while. He lifted a hand, slow enough for her to pull away if she wanted. When she did not, he rested it against her cheek. Rough palm, gentle touch, the kind that asked instead of claiming. Then he kissed her. It was not rushed, not hungry. It felt like the first honest thing after a long season of fear. Mara's fingers tightened in his shirt. When he drew back, he rested his forehead lightly against hers. Mama. Lucy's sleepy voice drifted from the cot. Mara laughed through tears and turned away, pressing a hand over her mouth. Caleb stepped back at once, giving her room, but when she glanced at him, the look in his eyes was warm enough to carry her through the night. The next morning changed everything and almost nothing. Caleb still fixed the barn. Sam still trailed after him. Lucy still helped Mara knead dough at the table. But now there was an awareness under every ordinary thing. When Mara passed Caleb a hammer, his fingers brushed hers, and neither of them acted as if they had not felt it. When they sat on the porch after supper, their shoulders touched and stayed that way. It was not a storm, it was a settling, a deep, steady shift that felt more lasting than fire ever could. A week later, Mara found Caleb at the well after sunset, staring out toward the wash. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. He looked at her, then back at the land. "Winter, fencing, maybe a chicken coop if Lucy keeps asking for one." Mara smiled. "That is what you are thinking about." "And you," he glanced at her again, "always you." She came to stand beside him. The light was fading. The sky had gone gold near the horizon. "I am afraid," she admitted. "Of what?" "That this is the part life punishes." Caleb turned fully toward her. "Then let it try." She shook her head, but she was smiling now through the fear. "You make battle sound easy." "No," his voice dropped. "I make standing with you sound worth it." Mara reached for his hand then, and he closed his fingers around hers like he had been waiting to do it in daylight for a long time. For the first time, she let herself wonder if a home could be more than a place. Maybe it could be a person, too. The summer turned slow and golden around the Mercer homestead. By August, the porch no longer groaned when Sam ran across it. The barn stood straight enough to trust in a storm. Lucy got her chicken coop in the end, though Caleb said it would only be 2 hens and somehow came home with 3. Mara planted beans near the back wall where the morning light held longest, and when the first green shoots pushed through the ground, she stood looking down at them with both hands pressed over her mouth as if something holy had happened in plain dirt. It was not that the hard things vanished. Fear still came sometimes. Mara would wake in the dark and reach for her children before her eyes were even open. Lucy still went quiet around strangers. Sam still clung when a voice got too sharp. Those wounds did not disappear just because a house had walls and a roof. But the difference now was what waited after fear. A lamp lit on the table, a latch on the door. Caleb's boots on the porch, a hand reaching back in the dark and always finding someone there. One hot evening, Mara stood at the stove stirring a pot of beans while Lucy shelled peas at the table and Sam drew crooked horses in the dust outside with a stick. Caleb came in from mending fence, shirt damp at the neck, hat pushed back. He washed at the basin, then leaned against the counter just long enough to brush his knuckles lightly against Mara's wrist. Lucy noticed everything. "You two do that a lot now," she said. Mara glanced over her shoulder. "Do what?" "Touch each other when you think nobody sees." Sam wandered in at that moment and asked what was for supper, saving Mara from answering. Caleb hid a smile badly. Lucy looked pleased with herself and went back to the peas. The truth was, she was right. There were small things now that had crept quietly into daily life. Caleb reaching for the heavy water bucket before Mara could. Mara setting aside the softest piece of biscuit for him without thinking. Caleb checking the children's blankets before bed. Mara waiting for the sound of his boots each evening with a feeling that had begun to shape itself into peace. A few days later, they took the wagon into Patagonia for supplies. It was the first time Mara had ridden into town beside Caleb and the children as though they belonged together. She did not expect the weight of that to settle over her so strongly, but it did. Lucy sat between them on the bench in her best ribbon. Sam bounced in the wagon bed with a sack ready for flour and sugar. Caleb had shaved that morning. Mara tried not to notice and failed. They stopped first at the mercantile. The woman behind the counter smiled at Caleb, then looked at Mara and the children with open curiosity. "Your family?" she asked. Caleb did not hesitate. "Yes." The word hung in the air. Mara should have corrected it. She should have said something careful and temporary. Instead, she stood there with Lucy holding her hand and Sam leaning against Caleb's leg and felt something in her chest go still. Not frozen, settled, as if a piece of her had heard the truth before the rest of her caught up. On the way back to the wagon, Mara walked in silence. Caleb carried the flour over one shoulder like it weighed nothing. When he set it down, she said quietly, "You answered quick in there." He looked at her. Was I wrong? The street noise seemed far away for a moment. A mule brayed. Someone laughed outside the feed store. Dust moved over the boards in the wind. "No," Mara said. "You were not wrong." They rode home under a pink evening sky. Lucy fell asleep against Mara's side before they reached the gate. Sam sat beside Caleb for the last stretch, holding the reins with solemn care while Caleb kept one hand close in case the horse pulled. When the house came into view, Caleb glanced toward it and then toward Mara. He looked like a man thinking hard about something. That night, after the children were asleep, he found her on the porch. She sat on the top step with her shawl around her shoulders and the warm dark stretching wide in front of her. He lowered himself beside her, slow from a day of work. "I have been meaning to ask you something," he said. Mara's pulse changed at once. She kept her face turned toward the yard. "That sounds serious." "It is." She looked at him then. Moonlight caught the line of his jaw and the tired kindness in his face. Caleb Mercer never looked dramatic. He looked dependable. Strangely, that made moments like this hit harder. He held his hat in both hands. "The judge in Patagonia can make it legal." Mara frowned a little. "Make what legal?" "The children." She stared at him. "I asked when I traded for nails last month," he said, "what it would take if a man wanted to adopt 2 children not born to him." He swallowed once. "If their mother wished it." The whole porch seemed to tilt beneath her. "Caleb, I know they are yours first. I know that never changes." His voice stayed steady, but she heard the feeling under it. "But if anything ever happened to you, I want nobody on this earth able to say those children are not mine to protect." He looked down at the hat in his hands. "And if nothing happens, I still want the right to claim them proper, in front of the law, in front of anybody." Mara had thought herself cried out months ago. She had been wrong. He went on before she could speak. "You forgot one thing." A wet laugh escaped her because of course he would say it now. "What?" "My last name." He lifted his eyes to hers. I meant all of it, Mara. From the day I found you in the road, I was not only offering help, I was offering a place, a life, mine if you wanted it. His voice softened. I want Lucy and Sam to have it too. Tears ran down before she could stop them. She covered her mouth with one hand. Caleb's expression changed at once. If this is too much, say so. I will wait. I will keep waiting. You do not have to answer tonight. Mara shook her head and laughed through the tears. No, that is the trouble with you. He blinked. What is? You say the kind of things a woman remembers for the rest of her life. For the first time since she had known him, Caleb looked almost uncertain. That did something wild and tender to her heart. She reached for his hand. I want that, she said. I want them to have your name. His breath left him hard. And I want it too, she whispered. He did not ask her to repeat it. He understood. A week later, he rode with Mara and the children into Patagonia again. The judge sat behind a scarred desk and asked his questions in a bored tone that did not match the importance of the moment. Mara answered with both hands clasped tight in her lap. Caleb answered with quiet certainty. Lucy tried very hard to behave like a grown lady. Sam swung his boots and nearly knocked over a spittoon. By the time they stepped back out into the sun, the papers were signed. Lucy looked up at Caleb first. Does that mean we are really yours now? Caleb crouched to her height. It means I was yours already. Now the law finally caught up. Sam threw both arms around his neck. Lucy followed a second later, less dramatic but just as fierce. Mara stood with one hand pressed over her heart and watched the three of them together. There were moments in life so full that words only got in the way. This was one. The wedding came in early autumn under the cottonwood near the spring. There was no grand crowd. Just the judge again, a widow from 2 miles over to stand witness, and the children dressed as clean as scrubbed hands and careful mending could make them. Mara wore a blue dress she had stitched and restitched until it fit right. Caleb wore his best shirt and looked at her as if there had never been anything in the world worth seeing before that moment. When the judge began speaking, Mara barely heard him. She only heard the wind in the cottonwood leaves and the low rustle of Lucy's skirt and Sam trying to stand still and failing. Caleb's eyes never left hers. When the time came, the judge asked if she would take Caleb Mercer as her husband. Yes, Mara said before the man had fully finished. Caleb smiled then, not the small one he used most days, a full one. Deep and bright and unguarded. And do you? The judge began. Yes, Caleb said, and Sam laughed because even he knew that answer had come fast. Afterward, Lucy threw flower petals too early. Sam dumped the whole basket at Mara's feet. Nobody minded. Caleb kissed her under the cottonwood while the children clapped like they had witnessed a miracle. Maybe they had. That night, after supper and laughter, and the quiet joy of hearing Lucy call out to Sam from the yard that they were late for chores, Mara stood at the kitchen window Caleb had cut into the east wall months before. The last of the light stretched over the grass. The house behind her held warmth and voices, and the smell of cornbread cooling on the table. Caleb came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. You still thinking? He asked softly. I am. About what? She rested her hands over his. About a road in the desert, about a wagon, about a man who should have turned me in and did not. His chin brushed her hair. That woman had poor aim. Mara smiled. No, she was aiming at the wrong thing. He turned her gently to face him, and now. She looked up into the face that had become home in every way that mattered. Now, she said, I have your last name. Then she kissed him first. Outside, the land stretched quiet and dry beneath the stars. Inside, the children laughed in the next room. The house stood firm against the night, and the life they had built together, out of hunger and mercy and stubborn love, held fast.